All right, well, we've been working through this why church thing for a while, and it's critical. You know, we live in this age today where it's just so segmented. The more connected we get through our devices, the less connected we actually are. It really is strange, isn't it? I mean, it's so difficult to get people together, and I've said it before, catastrophically don't even know many of my neighbors that I sleep just, a few 100 yards away from, and I don't even know their names. It's just the age in which we live. Many people will say, well, I just don't think we need church anymore. You can get it on YouTube, you can get it on somewhere, you can get it. It's short-sighted. I'm going to try to persuade you that that is the case, both for the advancement of the kingdom of Jesus and for our own well-being. It's critical that we come together. And I'm just talking about Sunday. I mean, the real work of this thing goes outside of Sunday. In fact, Van G, she was in first service, she suggested last week that we have a little sign. So you come in, Church of the Red Door, and you go kind of wind around the river here and cross the bridge, and we learn and we're equipped, as we talked about last week. And as you leave, she said, we should have a sign that says, okay, now you're entering the mission field, your mission field. I think that's pretty profound, and that's where a lot of the action happens. Sunday we gather for corporate worship. We gather for all kinds of reasons. What I want to talk to you about is not just coming to church on Sunday. What I'd really like to talk to you about today is how do we advance Jesus? If you'll remember last week, we talked about the 3 meals everyone must eat. Bread. First one, afikomen, if you'll remember, the pierced, the striped, the unleavened bread that they were told to eat alongside the Passover lamb, representing what? Jesus' death, His burial, and eventually His resurrection. Him being the Lamb of God, being pierced and striped for us that make us right with God. The very first step, the very first meal, spiritually speaking, that you must eat, irrespective of your background, irrespective of whether your grandfather was a Presbyterian or your dad was an elder in the church, you must eat of the bread, which is Jesus. You must eat His death on your behalf. That leads you out of Egypt through your baptism and then into the next meal, which is the manna. Jesus claimed to be the manna that came down from heaven. They were 40 years eating the manna. That's discipleship. All these classes, all Sunday morning, reading your Bible, all the different kind of things. You must eat your daily bread because you advance, you're equipped, you become effective in in His war against darkness. We saw that at Christmas time, right? Isaiah 9. Out of gloom, those who lived in gloom will see a great light. Those who live in a dark land, that's the task. But we have to be able to handle accurately the Word. And then finally last week, at some point, they got through the wilderness, and it said they had to prepare provisions for themselves. That's you reading your own Bible, you being able to handle this thing in a way that is reflective of your King. You should know something about your King, what He said about reality, shouldn't you? I mean, if we're going to have an impact, we're talking about changing the world. We're not just trying to get people to go to church. We want to change the world. I know that's radical. It's crazy sounding. But that's what Jesus, as we'll see this morning, told us to do. So, the last meal is what? Well, Jesus in John 4, the disciples came back, just restating what we talked about last week. Jesus came and His disciples were like, hey, you need to eat. You've got to be hungry. There's a lot going on here. And He goes, look, I have food that you don't even know about. And they're like, who brought Him food? They didn't know what was going on. He said, my food is to do the will of Him who sent me. So the third meal is actually doing the will of the Father. It becomes your spiritual food. If you just eat Bible studies and manna and sermons your whole life and never really get active in using your gifts, never really get active in a missional community where there's a connection, you just won't be able to eat much of the third meal. It doesn't mean you're not saved. It just means that you're not living for the King, for the glory of Jesus. And I want to talk to you more specifically about that today. I'm not here to beat you up in any way, in any shape, or any form. I want to see you excel in what God's called you to do, and it necessitates missional community. Some of you may have a multifaceted view of missional community. I do. I mean, I've got the Links community, I've got the Church of the Red Door community, I've got our stuff going on in the Middle East, I've got little operations going all over the place where there's a collective coming, and we're always better together, which we've talked about, but I'll be honest with you, there is no way I'd be standing here without a community. I mean, think about it. I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to plant a church, we're going to do a deal. I tell you what, we wouldn't exist after 8 years, and we'd be in a little tent out in the middle of the desert somewhere, and I'd be, who knows what I'd be smoking out there. I don't know. I'd be completely out of it. There's no way. But together, where God begins to orchestrate people who gave their lives as living sacrifices, and as that happens and they begin to come together, it starts to have an impact. Well, we believe globally. I know that sounds crazy, a little local church, but the desert's no normal place. People come from all over the world here. Why couldn't we have a global impact? But there's no way I can do it alone, and there's no way you can do it alone. And together we find meaning, as we'll see, and context. All these things begin to come together, and there's a narrative for our life. I want to read 2 quick passages for you just to remind you that Jesus said this was important. And then I want to give you 3 reasons, outcomes in your own life that will profoundly change the trajectory of your life. Well, first of all, Matthew 28, many will know this. I've baptized hundreds of people here in the valley, and I always quote this verse. It's Jesus' kind of last will and testament before he leaves planet Earth, and this is what he says, Matthew 28, verse 18. Jesus came up and spoke to them and said, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth." That's significant because I know we win. If he's got all authority in heaven and on earth, I want to be on that team. He's got first-round draft picks for all of eternity, and he's got a super team. That's what he's saying. All authority, not some authority, all authority has been given to me. And he says, go, because that's true, go therefore, and what? Make disciples of the Jews. No, of all nations. We are halfway around the globe. That's what we're doing. We're still walking out today. In your hearing, we're walking this out. And then baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And then teach them to observe all that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you even to the end of the age. Why, church? So we can do that better. Many of you, how many people have ever baptized? Raise your hand if you've ever baptized anybody. Like personally baptized. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, maybe 12, 11, 12 of you. Fantastic. Most of us haven't actually done that. But how many have been involved in missional community that has baptized people and you've played an integral role? Raise your hand. Okay, now we're talking lots of people, right? So this is what is so critical. We do this together. Look, there's only a few people that can stand up here, probably many of them better than I could. Anyway, a few people will take this position. There will be, look, it's multifaceted. But what's crucial for us to understand is that God has created us in such a way to be dependent. To be dependent. I am so dependent. My lanes are so narrow, but together we can change the world. I believe that. I'm sorry. I believe that. John 14, you say, well, I don't know, that's a big deal, changing the world. It seems like a lot. Well, listen to what Jesus said in John 14, verse 12. He said, truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, pretty impressive works, he will do also, and greater works than these will he do, because I go to be with the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, I will do, and the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I'll do it. And by the way, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first read that, I was just like, what did he just? You can't. I have to have the wrong translation. We need something. Greater works than Jesus. Yeah, greater works than Jesus. On a larger scale, I mean, my involvement with Coach Mack and watching, Promise Keepers and knowing what God had done through a coach at Colorado and hundreds of thousands of men filling stadiums for a decade plus. Jesus never got that kind of crowd. That's impressive. But it's just a few people failed flawed people who said, I give you my body, a living sacrifice, and a missional community came together, and many men, many wives' lives were changed because men began to make promises and became better fathers and became better husbands because of that movement. Powerful, powerful movement, greater things. So those are the things we know. Why would we do that? Clearly, to advance the kingdom and to make Jesus famous. He deserves it. He gave everything for us that we might, what? Serve Him, live for Him, change the totality of how we think about reality, get on page with His assignments. Okay, all that's true, but now what I'd like to do is talk to you about three things that I believe are so crucial in us understanding that we will be changed through doing that. Jesus said, I came to give life, and life more abundantly. If that's true, it sure seems like a cross here. I mean, I got to obey all His commandments. I can't do the things I want to do. No, He promised me abundant life on the other side. So number one, what would those be? It just gives structure to our lives. We live in such an unstructured environment. The Coachella Valley has to be the least structured of all places. Why? Because there's a lot of wealth here, and the more wealth you have, the more options you have, and we become disjointed, disunified. And in fact, we work our whole lives so we don't have to be beholden to anybody. Os Guinness is, and I've quoted Oz before, but just a profound international speaker, and I think he's pointing to this. We run from need. We run from it. We want to be self-sufficient, which is ridiculous because we're completely and utterly dependent on a creator. Again, the finite, completely dependent on the infinite, even for the next breath. But we have the illusion. We have the illusion that we are self-made, independent, don't need anybody for anything. And here's what he says. We just happen to be overloaded. We happen to be saturated. There's just too much to do and too little time to do it. You know, Oz says, but life goes on. Neither planning nor juggling can span the gap, but you know what? Life just goes on. At the level of our relationships alone, their sheer number, variety, and intensity become impossible, but life goes on. One minute we feel the vertigo of unlimited possibility, and the next, just the frustration of superficiality. You know what? But life goes on. The result of all this overload is not only, that we have a profound loss of unity, solidity, and coherence in life. No, experience comes to us shredded into fragments and, episodes. Each moment stands on its own, with neither roots in any yesterday nor consequences for any tomorrow. Like a soundbite or a headline, each experience bursts into our attention and quickly fades from memory. I quoted this with a group of men at a Links event here a couple of weeks ago. But listen to this. Today's rage, it's ridiculous tomorrow. Think back 20 years. Have you watched somebody, at the end of the year, typically you'll get this kind of retrospective of the year, and sometimes I don't know if you watch this, decade of the 80s, and they do the whole, what the 80s look like, and the 70s and the 90s. Most of that stuff at the time, I was like, man, this is so important. This carries so much weight. And you look back and it just looks ridiculous. I mean, doesn't it? I mean, it's just like, I can't believe we wore those clothes. I can't believe we thought that music was really that good. I can't believe, we slept out all night to go see those people who were, they were just potheads and this and that. I don't know, whatever. We look back, it just looks so ridiculous. It looks so ridiculous. Today's celebrity, tomorrow's bore. It's really true. Not surprisingly, attention deficit is a contemporary disorder, and genuine tradition, it's a scarce commodity. Scarce. So what do? We have to have rails on our lives. We do everything we can not to be on rails. And I'll admit, sometimes the old 9 to 5 early in your career before you owned your business, and I'm not going to ever work for anybody else again, and it can be challenging. You got a different master in Jesus. He wants to give you context. He wants to give you rails for your life so that you can construct your whole life around His kingdom, the advancement of the kingdom and His glory. Whether you're running a business or raising children or watching grandchildren or just being a good neighbor, you're still doing it for the glory of King Jesus, and you need community to do it. And we'll see why that is. You just need community to say, you know what, just keep getting up. Somebody to call you when you're so discouraged. Most people, they don't even have people in life that would know they're discouraged, that would know that they hadn't showed up for, a year. Where have they been? Most people are so isolated. They're so connected on social media, but they're so isolated in reality. It's tragic. It is, I'm telling you, we will look back. I believe we will look back one day on this social media and our phones and all this, and we'll say that was a devastating sociological experiment. People say, churches are closing down. Are you crazy building another church? The last thing you do. People don't want to get together. They're all connected in different ways, and churches are closing all over the United States. I don't care. God said do it. It's one of the reasons we're here. I think people need people more than at any time ever. There's too much going on. The second thing, it just gives meaning to our life. A story, I'll tell the story, that second song that I played this morning. Listen to what Oz says. He says, calling provides the storyline for our lives. Think about that for a minute. Now, does the calling of Jesus provide the storyline for your life? Let me just ask you to do a quick mental exercise with me here. Somebody who knows you well, and I was able to go and ask them, what is the storyline you would suggest is true for Betty or Ted or Frank? Tell me, what's the storyline of their lives? Would their first impulse to say she just wants to glorify God. She does everything for the advancement of the gospel and the glory of Jesus. Would that be it, or would it be something else? Now, I'm telling you, this is a challenging question, isn't it? But I think it's one that once we have an intention to have that be true, guess what happens? You'll make 1,000 decisions a day that will lead toward that inevitability. I was playing golf with a young man, and I'd actually first met him on a trip up to Cherry Hills in Denver, and he caddied for us. And a lot of caddies are like, I'm trying to play the tour and all this, and maybe 1 out of 1,000 actually has the skill. So I just got introduced to this young man. And we were talking about this the other day, and he actually has some mad skills. I mean, I think he actually has the skills, just in terms of just brute skill to be able to make it. There's a lot of other factors that go in to make a living on the PGA Tour, but I was very impressed. And so I asked him, he said, well, I need to go to this qualifier, but I really don't have the money, and then so he's going to go to this. And I said, wait a minute. I said, once you make the decision, you'll find a way to get the money that you need. I mean, but I think right now, I challenged him with it a little bit, and he was certainly open to it. It was kind of like, well, maybe that's true. There's a certain place in life where you just make a massive decision. I'm going to give my body a living sacrifice to Christ. And then everything flows from that. You'll make decisions that you never would have made. And sometimes they're innocuous. You can't even see them happening at the moment, but the reality is it's true. You make little tiny decisions every day that all come under the umbrella of the storyline of your life. What is the storyline of your life? Again, the thing that's most disturbing is Jesus was clear about it. It's very difficult. And I'll use different language. Very difficult for a wealthy woman or a wealthy man to have a storyline that centers around the advancement of the kingdom of God. There are too many options. There are too many available opportunities for them, right? It's very difficult. So we live in a place that is ripe for incredible fruitfulness, and yet we must have a storyline. We must have a storyline that centers around the advancement of the gospel. Oz says calling provides a storyline for our lives, and thus a sense of continuity and coherence in the midst of a very fragmented and confusing modern world. Would you agree? The saturation and overload produced by pluralization and reinforced by mobility are a leading cause of modern alienation. It's true. We're not committed to anything, and as a result, we're alienated. We feel free, but we're actually a slave. It's strange. It's a paradox. It's upside down. Almost everything Jesus said was upside down. You want to save your life? Lose it for my sake. You want to save it? Lose it. He says, if we have lived in too many places, had too many jobs, known too many people, watched too much TV, how do we make sense of all this? Is there a storyline to our lives, or just a jumble of experiences that are, now catch this, sound and fury that amount to nothing? I've been at a lot of bedsides in my life. I can see it in people's eyes. When they come to the end of their lives and they more contemplate meeting their Creator, and you can just see it in their hearts and their eyes sometimes, in their conversation, if they're even able to speak. I kind of wasted my life. Why, church? Because I don't want you to waste your life. Collectively together, we can come together each week and say, no, this is important. That's not important. This is much more important. And then we get re-energized. We get our daily bread. We either come to Jesus, we eat the first meal, or we're discipled, or at some point we're actually together and we're using our gifts and we're saying, and we're celebrating, and people's generations being changed. There are generational curses on families. You know, my father was an alcoholic. My father's father was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. We've got alcoholism. We've got sexual abuse in our family. We've got dysfunction, materialism. We've got people, we've got all this stuff. And no, the buck stops here. Why? Because a community of people with varying gifts comes together and says, no, not on my watch. I want to be on the winning team. I want to be where, well, all authority is. Jesus has all authority. I want to be on that team. Which leads us to our third and final view. It leads to permanence in our lives. Psalm 90, verse 17, the prayer from the psalmist says, Lord, please confirm the works of our hands. That word in Hebrew is make it permanent. Whatever you do, I don't want to finish my life and say it was sound and fury amounting to nothing. I don't want today's activities to be tomorrow's boredom or forget. I forget everything. Laura says, we'll watch an entire movie. And I go, that's the greatest movie I've ever seen. She said, we saw it a year ago. I mean, seriously. I'm like, there's no way I saw that movie. She goes, and that was one you didn't sleep through. It's true. He said, that movie we saw a year ago. And I'm trying to put in the plot line and the people and why can't I remember this? But I'll tell you this. I bet I remember every single face that I've ever baptized. Every person I've ever seen come to Jesus, emblazoned on my head, in my mind. It's permanent. There's an intuitive sense that that's true. We want permanence, but sometimes we argue that our lives aren't that much, that we're somehow just some random chance. There's not a chance, you're a chance. Not a chance. Not a chance. One of my favorite authors, as many of you know, Eugene Peterson, he writes a phenomenal piece about running with horses. Running with horses. I'll tell you this, in his book, listen to what he says. He's talking about Jeremiah. If you'll remember Jeremiah chapter 12, verse 5, God says, Jeremiah, if you've run with footmen and they've tired you out, how in the world are you ever going to run with the horses? How are you going to do that? How's that going to happen? Most of us are. Eugene says it's understandable that there are retreats from excellence. Of course, veering's away from risk. Well, we don't want risk, not at my age. C.S. Lewis says, oh, you're never too old to set a new goal and to dream a new dream. Never. You're never too old to do that. He goes on and says, well, we like to withdraw from faith. It's easy. It's hard to run with the horses. It's easier to define oneself minimally. A biped, two-footed, featherless creature. It's easy to define yourself as that because what do you really have to live up to? You got a few instincts, you make your best way, and then you're gone forever, right? He says, and live securely within that definition. Much easier to do that than to be defined maximally. The Bible says you're created a little bit lower than God himself, created in God's own image. He says, and then to live adventurously in that reality? It's unlikely, I think, that Jeremiah was spontaneous or quick in his reply to God's question. Do you really want to run with the horses? I don't know. The ecstatic ideals of a new life had been splattered with the world's cynicism. The euphoric impetus of a youthful enthusiasm no longer carried him. Maybe you ran out of enthusiasm a long time ago. No, he weighed the options. Yes, he did. He counted the cost. Yes, he did. He tossed and turned in hesitation. His response, well, when it came, it was not verbal. It was biographical. It's the way he lived his life. It's the way he connected. It's the way that he cared passionately about God's interest in the earth. In his day, he was concerned about, well, preserving Israel so that one day the Messiah would be able to come. It was a very difficult life. But I'll tell you this, he ran with the horses. In closing this morning, I want you to go, if you would, to Hebrews chapter 10. This is the Apostle Paul's letter to the believing Jewish community, those Jews who believed in Jesus. Many of them had seen him, a resurrected Jesus. Others had been healed by him or known him in his brief 3.5 year ministry. Here's what he says. He says, okay, you believing Jews, Paul says, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering. He who promised is faithful. Some of you need to hear that this morning. You know, he's faithful. You say, well, I don't feel it right now. Feels like he's a million miles away. I'm broken. My body's broken. I have a relationship that's broken. I've got a bad diagnosis. I'm just telling you, he's faithful. He is faithful. And in the understanding of that faithfulness, let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and to good deeds. I don't care. I don't care who you are, how independent you think you are. You need to be stimulated. I need to be stimulated to love and good deeds. And often by the biographical storyline of somebody else's life. Even if they're not saying anything, just watching the way they love people, watching the way they care for their community, watching them care about the advancement of things Jesus is concerned about. When I see that, I am inspired. I am motivated. It drives me. I want to be more like that. I want to be like Jesus when I see Jesus in you. And you need to see that in me, and you need to see that in others. You have to be. So notice, because that's true, watch what he says. How are you going to stimulate each other to good? He said, don't forsake the assembling together, as is the habit of some people. Some people already have the habit of not coming together. And I'm not just talking about Sunday morning. It includes that. I'm talking about the whole week. Are you connected? Do people know who you are? Do they know you by name? Could they say, oh, we couldn't do it without Sue? There is no way we could. This operation would not work. Boy, did I need the newbies. When I first came there, I didn't know anybody, and I went to their class, and I learned more about Jesus, and wow, without them, I wouldn't be where I am. None of us would be here without somebody else having, well, not forsaking getting together. Whether it be for a cup of coffee or a Sunday morning service or a fellowship group, you just have to get together. God made it that way. We want to be independent. It's the worst thing for us. We want Diet Coke to be really good for us, but it's not so good. You know, I wish Skittles were good for me. You know, my doctor said eat the rainbow, and so I tried to eat the rainbow, and my wife said, well, it's not Skittles. So I wish that was good for me, but it's not. It's not good for me. What is good for me? The broccoli of the Spirit here, you know what I mean? We need each other, and we need to be on mission together. Some of you just need, maybe for the first time, to eat your first meal. You can do that today. Lord, I believe in you. You were pierced for me, scourged for me. I'm right with God because, well, I'm going to eat that meal first. You have to eat that meal first. You don't start at the other end. Some of you are here, you need to be discipled. You need to learn your word. And some of you, you've been taught long enough. Get in the game. Win. Be part of a missional community. Advance the kingdom. Let's build this campus out. Let's get things going. Come on, there are people that are in desperate need of you. Well, they're in desperate need of us all together. So evidently they had already started skipping. There were already habits. That's human beings. But hey, do this. Encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So why church? In conclusion, we need one another. You need to be trained. You need to be equipped for the work of service. We need each other. We do. It's not because I need a job. It's not because we just keep the institution going. No. We want to see this valley changed. And by changing the valley, I think, well, we could impact the world. We could. Well, let's be clear. The Spirit could through us. The Spirit can through us. We'll fail and flounder and make all kinds of mistakes, but we're intentional. We're willing. Are you willing? Are you willing to be part of a church? Not just come, be part of a church. That's why the church exists. It's for you, and it's for others. It's for all of us. In closing, Revelation 19, verse 5, this is in your future. This is in your future. Verse 5 says, a voice came from the throne saying, give praise to God, all you his bondservants, you who fear him, the small and the great. And he says then, he has a vision of the heavenly realm. Then I heard something like a voice of a great multitude, and like the sound of many waters, and like the sound of a mighty peals of thunder, saying, I'm sure glad I played another round of golf. No, I'm sure glad I kept that last $100 in my 401k. Well, I don't know. Hallelujah, for the Lord our God, the Almighty reigns. We want you to make good decisions today so that the works of your hand can be made permanent. That's a good reason to be involved in church. That's why I'm here, encouraged by you. So we're going to close with this. This is a forever kingdom. It's permanent, never goes away. Sorry. All this others, it'll be gone tomorrow. It'll be gone tomorrow. Nothing wrong with enjoying time, sunset, having a nice meal. There's nothing wrong with enjoying recreational time. I'm not saying, this is not, hey, let's all just be miserable. That not at all. And if you saw that, you're not reading it right. But this is like, I want my life to mean something, to be in the context of something other than me. Why? Because I want it to last forever. Holy, holy, forever, which I think would be a good song to conclude this day and lead us right into 2025.